The message arrived at 3:00 in the morning Earth Standard Time. John Morrison was already awake. He had not slept well in weeks. Something was coming. He could feel it the way old soldiers feel storms before they break. His personal console lit up with the golden seal of the Galactic Council. Highest priority, mandatory attendance. No delays permitted. John read the message twice, then he picked up his communicator and called Sara Chan. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was alert, not sleepy. She had felt it. The council just summoned us, John said. I know, I got the same message. Sara paused. They're moving the fleet. I've been watching the sensor data for the past 6 hours, 300 warships repositioning around Sol system. John closed his eyes. 200 years of patience. 200 years of proving humanity's worth. Through kindness, through aid, through every act of goodwill they could manage. And still it came to this. How long do we have, he asked. The session starts in 14 hours. Our shuttle is already being prepared. John stood and walked to his window. Outside, the diplomatic station orbited peacefully above a gas giant in neutral space. Stars filled the darkness. Somewhere out there, Earth waited. 8 billion people who trusted their government to keep them safe. I'll meet you at the shuttle bay in 1 hour, John said. John, Sara's voice carried a warning. They're going to invoke the civilizational constraints protocol. I've seen the draft resolution. Forced disarmament, restricted expansion, cultural oversight on every human world. They want to put a collar on us. I know what they want. No species has ever refused the council, not in 40,000 years. John smiled, though Sara could not see it. Then I suppose we'll be the first. He ended the call and began to dress. His diplomatic uniform felt heavier than usual. The weight of worlds pressed down on his shoulders. The shuttle journey to Nexus Prime took 11 hours. John spent most of it reviewing files he had already memorized. History of the Galactic Council, the rise and fall of species who had challenged their authority, the quiet disappearances of civilizations that grew too powerful too fast. Sara worked beside him in silence. Her tablet displayed fleet movements, economic data, and psychological profiles of every council member. She was the finest strategic mind humanity had produced in a generation. If anyone could find a way through this crisis, it was her. But even Sara looked worried. They've been planning this for decades, she said. Finally, the fleet movement started 8 months ago. Very subtle, very patient. They wanted the noose in place before we even knew it existed. They're afraid of us, John said. They should be. Sara set down her tablet. In 200 years we went from radio signals to matching their technology. No species has ever advanced that fast. We terrify them. We've done nothing but help them. The Polari rescue these for disaster. The peace treaties we brokered, we've given them no reason to fear us. Sara shook her head. That's exactly why they fear us. A species with our capabilities that chooses kindness over conquest. They don't understand it. They think it's a trick. They think we're waiting for the right moment to strike. John stared out the window at the swirling colors of hyperspace. Then we'll have to show them they're wrong, and if they won't listen. John did not answer. Some questions had no good answers. Nexus Prime was the heart of galactic civilization, a constructed world the size of a small moon. It had served as The council's seat of power for 30,000 years, ships from 1,000 species filled the space around it. Trade vessels, diplomatic cruisers, and military escorts formed a constantly shifting dance of metal and light. The human embassy ship, Defiant Hope, looked small among them, a modest vessel designed for diplomacy, not war. The council had insisted on it. Humanity was not permitted to bring warships to Nexus Prime. John wondered if they would regret that rule soon. The council chamber occupied the center of Nexus Prime. It was vast beyond human comprehension. Dome of crystal and living metal rose 3 km above the main floor. Galleries carved into the walls could seat representatives from every known species. Today those galleries were full. Word had spread. Everyone wanted to witness humanity's humiliation. John walked down the central aisle with Sara. Beside him, thousands of alien eyes watched them, some curious, some hostile, some pitying. The youngest species in the galaxy, about to be taught its place. The 12 seats of the council rose above the main floor on platforms of polished stone. Each seat held a member of an elder species, beings whose civilizations had flourished when humans still lived in caves. They looked down at John and Sara with expressions that ranged from contempt to cold satisfaction. Counselor Korth of the V-Thrani occupied the speaker's seat. His species resembled tall, thin humanoids with skin like burnished copper and eyes that held the weight of millennia. He had led the council for 300 years. He had overseen the integration of 17 species during his tenure. None of those species existed as independent civilizations anymore. Ambassador Morrison, Corvette said, his voice carried easily through the vast chamber. You stand before the Galactic Council to answer for your species violations of established order. John remained still. He had expected threats, not accusations. What violations? He asked calmly. Korth gestured and holographic displays flickered to life around the chamber. Images of human warships, recordings of military exercises, technical specifications for weapons that humanity had never used. In anger, your species has developed military capabilities far beyond your station. Corvette said, you have constructed vessels capable of threatening elder species. You have pursued technologies that were not shared with you. You have grown too powerful too quickly. The images shifted. Human history played out in terrible detail. Wars, nuclear explosions, the camps where humans had slaughtered their own kind. Every dark moment preserved and displayed for the galaxy to judge. This is the nature of humanity. Korth continued. Violence, aggression, an endless hunger for power. You have spent 2 centuries pretending to be civilized, but we see the truth. Given time, you will become a threat to all life in this galaxy. Murmurs rippled through the galleries. Many species nodded in agreement. The evidence seemed damning. Sara stepped forward. May I speak, Counselor? Corvette's eyes narrowed. The protocol called for John to respond, not his advisor, but refusing her would look petty. He nodded. Our history is violent, Sara acknowledged. We do not deny it. We learned to kill before we learned to heal. We built weapons before we built hospitals. But Counselor, that history is exactly why you should trust us. Silence fell over the chamber. Even Corvette looked puzzled. We know what violence costs, Sara continued. We have seen the bodies. We have buried the Dead, every war we fought taught us the price of hatred. Other species learned peace through isolation or through conquest. We learned it through suffering. That lesson does not fade. She gestured and her own holographic display appeared, images of human aid. Workers pulling survivors from the ruins of the Polari home world. Human doctors treating radiation victims on the floor. Human diplomats sitting for months in negotiation rooms, patiently building peace between species who had warred for centuries. In 200 years humanity has asked nothing from this council. Said we have only given, we shared our medical advances freely, we sent our children to die saving strangers, we brokered peace treaties that the council had abandoned as hopeless. We did these things because they were right, not because we expected reward. Corpse expression hardened. Pretty words do not change the threat you represent. The council has voted. The civilizational constraints protocol will be imposed on humanity. You will disarm. You will accept oversight. You will submit to our guidance until we deem you ready for independence. And if we refuse, John asked, the question hung in the air. In 40,000 years, no species had asked it. Corvette smiled. It was not a kind smile. Ambassador, you should know that council fleets have surrounded your home system. 300 warships stand ready to enforce our will. Your colonies are blockaded. Your trade routes are closed. Refuse and humanity will be pacified by force, except in your species will survive. The choice seems simple. John looked at Sara. She met his eyes and gave a small nod. They had prepared for this moment. They had hoped it would never come, but hope was not a strategy. And humanity had learned long ago to prepare for the worst while working for the best. John stepped forward to the speaking platform. His footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Every being in the chamber leaned forward, waiting for humanity's submission. Counselor Corp, John said. His voice was calm and clear. On behalf of Earth and all human colonies, I must respectfully decline your offer. The chamber erupted. Shouts of disbelief mixed with cries of outrage. Corv rose from his seat, his copper skin flushing with anger. You cannot refuse. No species has ever refused the council. John stood firm against the storm of noise. Then we will be the first, he said. The galleries fell silent. Representatives of 1,000 species stared at the two humans standing alone against the might of galactic civilization. Two small figures, two fragile beings of flesh and bone. The galaxy watched in fear, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, something stirred. Something humanity had built in secret, something that would change everything. But that revelation would come later. For now, John Morrison and Sara Chan simply stood. They did not bow, they did not bend. They looked up at the ancient powers who had ruled the galaxy for millennia, and they refused to be afraid. It was the most human thing they could do. The chaos lasted for nearly an hour. Council guards moved to surround John and Sara, but Corv waved them back, killing the human ambassadors would only prove humanity right. The galaxy was watching. When order finally returned, the chamber hummed with tension. Species that had been comfortable in their seats now shifted nervously. The rules they had lived by for 40,000 years had just been broken by two soft-skinned beings from a young world. Corvette descended from his platform. He moved slowly, each step deliberate. His copper skin had returned to its normal shade, but his eyes burned. With cold fury, Ambassador Morrison, he said, stopping 3M from John, I do not think you understand your situation. This is not a negotiation. The Council does not bargain with lesser species. John held his ground, with respect. Counselor, we understand perfectly. You have 300 ships around our sun. You believe that gives you power over us. You believe we have no choice but to submit. You do not, then you should have. Listen more carefully when we ask permission to develop our own star drives. John's voice remained calm, almost pleasant. You should have watched more closely when we built our research stations. You should have wondered why a species as violent as you claim we are never attacked anyone. Corvette's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting? Sara stepped forward. She had been quiet during the chaos, watching the reactions of every species in the galleries. Now she carried a small data device. I am suggesting, she said, that the Council's intelligence services are not as thorough as you believe. May I present evidence to support our position? Corbth hesitated, refusing would look like fear. Agreeing might expose something he did not want exposed. Finally he nodded. Sara activated the device. New holographic displays replaced the images of human atrocities. These showed something very different. 200 years ago, humanity received first contact from the Polari Scout Unity. Sara began. We were grateful. We were excited. We believed we had found friends among the stars. The display showed human celebrations, crowds cheering in the streets, scientists weeping with joy. Within 10 years, we learned the truth about the Galactic Council. We studied the histories you shared with us. We noticed the patterns you thought we were too young to see. The display shifted. Species names and dates scrolled past. Dozens of them. The Viraki hegemony integrated 38,000 years ago. They developed jump drives independently. They no longer exist as a distinct culture. The Marathi collective integrated 22,000 years ago after developing antimatter weapons. Now they serve as enforcers for Council interest. The Tessic Republic integrated 4,000 years ago for growing too quickly. Their home world is now a museum. Murmurs spread through the galleries. Many of these histories were not widely known. Every species that rose too fast or developed too independently was absorbed, subjugated, or destroyed. Sara continued. The Council calls it integration. They speak of guidance and protection, but the result is always the same. The unique cultures disappear. The independent thoughts fade. What remains are obedient servants who enforce the old order on others. Corvette's voice cut through the chamber. We provide stability. Without the Council, the galaxy would tear itself apart in endless war. Perhaps, Sara said, or perhaps you simply fear any challenge to your power. We cannot know because the alternative has never been permitted to exist. She turned to face the galleries. Rather than the Council, humanity saw this pattern 190 years ago. We understood that one day you would come. For us, we had a choice. We could submit. Now, while we were still weak, we could fight openly and be crushed, or we could find a third way. John moved to stand beside her. Together they faced the gathered species of the galaxy. We chose to wait, John said. We chose to prove ourselves through actions rather than words. We helped the Polari when their sun began to die, even though it cost us resources we desperately needed. We Walked into radiation zones on the 4-2. Save people we had never met. We brokered peace treaties that your own diplomats had abandoned. We did these things because they were right, Sara added, but we also did them because we hoped you would see, we hoped you would understand that humanity was different, that we had learned from our violent history, that we wanted to be partners, not subjects. Korth laughed. It was not a pleasant sound, and yet you stand here, defying us. You claim to want peace, but you refuse our guidance. You speak of partnership, but you reject our authority. Your words and your actions do not match, Ambassador. John shook his head slowly. Counselor, partnership means equality. It means mutual respect. It means decisions made together, not orders given from above. What you offer is not partnership, it is surrender. Wearing a pleasant mask, he stepped closer to Korth. The guards tensed but did not move. I served in humanity's last great war, John said quietly. I saw what happens when one group claims the right to rule another by force. I buried friends who died fighting against that kind of tyranny. I swore an oath that I would never let it happen again. Fine words from a member of a violent species, Korth replied, but words change nothing. You have no fleet. You have no allies. You have nothing but pride, and pride does not stop warships. Sara smiled. It was the first time she had smiled since entering the chamber. Counselor, she said, I think it's time we introduced you to someone. She touched her communicator. A new holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed the bridge of a starship unlike anything the Council had ever seen. Sleek lines, weapons ports barely visible, technology that made no sense to the analysts. Frantically studying it from the galleries, a woman stood at the center of the bridge. She wore the uniform of the United Earth Navy, but the rank insignia was unfamiliar. Her dark skin gleamed in the soft light, and her eyes held the steady calm of someone who had spent a lifetime making impossible decisions. Council members, John said, allow me to introduce Fleet Admiral Diana Okonkwo, commanding officer of the United Earth Contingency Force. Corbett stared at the display. There is no such force. Our intelligence would have detected any human military buildup. Admiral Okonkwo spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet but carried perfectly through the chamber. With respect, Counselor, your intelligence detected exactly what we wanted it to detect. You saw our public defense fleet. You saw our research stations and our commercial vessels. You believed what we showed you because it confirmed what you already believed about us. Sara took over the display controls. The image expanded to show a star map. Points of light began appearing, dozens of them, then hundreds, then thousands. For the past 150 years, Sara explained, humanity has been building in the spaces you do not watch. Rogue planets, empty systems, the dark zones between spiral arms, places where no species travels because there is nothing there worth seeing. The points of light formed a pattern, a network spanning half the galaxy. 9,000 ships, Sara said, shipyards that can produce more automated factories, sensor networks that have mapped every council fleet position for over a century. We call it the contingency. Silence gripped the chamber, absolute, complete silence, the kind of silence that falls when a small creature suddenly reveals very large teeth. Corvette's voice emerged as barely more than a whisper. Impossible. You are a Young species you could not have built. This without us noticing. We are a young species that learned to survive by paying attention. John replied, we watched you, we learned from you, and we prepared for the day when watching and learning would no longer be enough. Admiral Okonkwo spoke again from her bridge. Counselor, as we speak, contingency elements are repositioning throughout the galaxy. Your 300 ships around Sol are now surrounded by 400 of ours. Your blockade forces have been identified and targeted. If you give the order to attack, you will destroy Earth. But you will lose every ship you have. And the war that follows will burn the galaxy for 1,000 years. Corvette turned to his fellow council members. They stared back with expressions ranging from terror to fury. The elder species had never faced this situation. Their power had always been absolute. Until now. John raised his hands in a gesture of peace. We do not want war. He said, we never wanted war. We built this fleet hoping we would never use it. We wanted to be wrong about you, Counselor. We wanted the Council to see us as partners rather than threats. Then why reveal it now? Corvette demanded. Why show us your strength when you claim to want peace? Sara answered him. Because you forced our hand, because you gave us no choice, and because we have spent 2 centuries trying to earn your trust through kindness, and you responded with warships and ultimatums. She walked to the center of the chamber and looked up at the galleries. Thousands of species watched her. Many of them were young civilizations that had faced similar threats from the Council. Many of them had submitted and lost themselves. What happens next is your choice, Sara said. You can order your fleets to attack. You can start a war that will devastate the galaxy. You can prove that humanity was right to fear you all along. She paused. Or you can do something that no council has ever done. You can admit that you were wrong. You can treat humanity as equals. You can build something new. Corv stood motionless. The weight of 40,000 years of history pressed down on him. The council had never apologized. The council had never retreated. The council had never shared power with anyone, but the council had also never faced 9,000 warships in a species that refused to be afraid. This session is suspended, Corvette finally said. His voice was barely audible. The council will deliberate in private. He turned and walked toward the exit, his robes trailing behind him. The other council members followed. None of them looked at John or Sara. The galleries began to empty, but slowly species lingered, watching the 2 humans who had shaken the foundations of galactic civilization. Some stared with fear, some with hatred, but others looked at them with something different, something that had been rare in this chamber for millennia. Hope. As the crowds thinned, representatives from several species approached John and Sara quietly. Polari ambassador, a Tessic trade delegate, a Marathi reformist who had risked everything to attend. They did not speak loudly. They did not make grand gestures. They simply introduced themselves and asked if humanity would be willing to talk. Sara glanced at John. He nodded almost imperceptibly. The real work was about to begin. The council's private deliberations stretched through the night and into the next day. Guards sealed the entrance to their chambers. No information escaped. The galaxy waited. John and Sara did not wait. They had too much work to do. Human embassy ship Defiant Hope had a Small conference room designed for quiet. Diplomatic meetings. By the end of the first day it was packed with representatives from 40 different species. By the second day that number had doubled. They came in secret. Most used maintenance tunnels or service corridors to avoid being seen. Council's eyes were everywhere on Nexus Prime, and being caught meeting with humanity could mean the end of their careers. Some might face worse, but they came anyway. Sara organized the meetings with careful precision. She grouped species by region, by shared interests, by common grievances. She made sure that ancient enemies did not end up in the same room without warning. She kept notes on everything and forgot nothing. John did what he did best. He talked, he listened, he made people feel heard. The Polari delegation arrived. First, their ambassador was an elderly female whose pale skin showed the marks of radiation exposure. She had been a child when humanity rescued her people from their dying sun. My grandmother told me stories about that day, she said. The human ships appeared without warning. Your people walked into zones that would kill them in minutes to carry our children to safety. You asked nothing in return. John shook his head. We asked for something. We asked for the chance to prove that we could be trusted. We hope that if enough species saw what humanity could be, the Council might see it too. And now we need more than hope. We need friends who are willing to stand with us. The Pori ambassador smiled. It was a weary smile, but genuine. My people owe humanity a debt we can never repay. You saved our children. You gave us a future. Whatever comes next, the Pori stand with you. Similar conversations repeated throughout the day. The Tussock, a young species facing their own integration pressure, offered their support in exchange for protection. The Marathi reformists, who had fought against their own government's brutal policies for generations, saw in humanity a chance to finally change their world. Not everyone was friendly. Some species came to threaten or to spy. A Vithrani trade minister warned John that humanity's defiance would only make things worse. Krish, military officer, demanded to know the locations of the contingency shipyard. Sara handled these encounters with icy politeness. She gave nothing away and recorded everything. On the third day, the meetings moved beyond simple alliances. Representatives began sharing intelligence, fleet positions, council voting patterns, secret agreements that had bound lesser species. For millennia, the picture that emerged was troubling but not surprising. The council maintained power through fear and division. They kept younger species fighting among themselves so they would never unite against their elders. They controlled technology carefully, ensuring that no civilization could ever catch up to them. They used economic pressure to crush dissent before it could spread, but cracks had been forming for centuries. The elder species had grown complacent. They believed their power was permanent. They never expected a young species to see through their games. Sara assembled the data into a strategic picture. She identified which species would likely support humanity, which would oppose them, and which could be convinced to remain neutral. The numbers were encouraging. If we can hold the coalition together, she told John on the third night, we represent nearly a third of the galaxy's economic output. The Council cannot ignore that. They can still choose war, John replied. He stared out the window at the lights of Nexus Prime, Corvith has built his entire career on the principle that the Council's authority cannot be questioned. Backing down now would destroy everything he believes in. Then we need to give him a way out that lets him save face. Do you have one? Sara was quiet for a long moment. I'm working on it. The summons came on the fourth day. Counselor Corvith requested a private meeting with the human ambassadors. No aides, no guards, no recording devices, just the three of them. John and Sara walked to the meeting chamber side by side. They had discussed what might happen. They had prepared for threats, for bribes, for desperate last-minute attacks. They were not sure what to expect. Corvith waited alone. He looked older than he had 4 days ago. The copper sheen of his skin had faded to a dull bronze. His eyes held exhaustion rather than arrogance. Sit, he said, gesturing to chairs across from his own. They sat for a long moment. Corvith simply looked at them. His gaze moved from John's weathered face to Sara's sharp eyes and back again. He seemed to be searching for something. The council is fractured, he said finally. Some want war, regardless of cost. They believe humanity must be destroyed before you grow any stronger. Others want to negotiate. They see the numbers and understand that victory is no longer certain. A few want to flee to distant galaxies rather than face a changed order. And you? John asked. Corvith's laugh was bitter. I have spent 300 years maintaining the order that my ancestors built. I have done things that I am not proud of because I believe they were necessary. I told myself that the Council's methods, however harsh, preserved peace and stability. He leaned forward. You have forced me to question that belief. The coalition you are building should have been impossible. These species hate each other. They have warred for millennia, and yet they are setting aside their conflicts to stand with you. Why? Sara answered him. Because we offered them something the Council never has: respect, a seat at the table, the promise that their voices would be heard, not ignored. Pretty words, miss, but how do you intend to keep that promise? You are one species among thousands. You cannot protect everyone. We don't intend to protect everyone, John said. We intend to create a system where everyone protects each other. Mutual defense, shared responsibility, decisions made by consensus rather than decree. Corvith shook his head slowly. You do not understand what you are proposing. The galaxy is not ready for democracy. The old hatreds run too deep. The moment you remove the Council's authority, 1,000 wars will erupt. Perhaps, Sara said, or perhaps the wars only continue because your authority forces species into conflict. Perhaps if they had a genuine voice in their own futures, they would choose differently. You gamble with billions of lives. So do you. Every time you impose integration on a species, you gamble that your judgment is better than theirs. Every time you suppress a rising civilization, you gamble that they would have been a threat. You have been gambling with the galaxy for 40,000 years, Counselor. You have just never had to face the consequences of losing. Corvith was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. What do you actually want? Not the speeches you gave in the chamber. What does humanity truly want from this? John considered the question carefully. This was the moment that mattered. The wrong answer would end any hope of peace. The right answer might save millions of lives. We Want a seat at the table, he said. Finally, not as supplicants begging for scraps, not as conquered people, accepting oversight as equals with a voice in the decisions that affect us. And the fleet you have revealed, the 9,000 ships hiding in the darkness, they remain where they are, not as a threat to you, as a guarantee that no one, not the Council, not anyone else, can impose their will on species that choose peace. Korth studied John's face. You would use your military power to protect others rather than to conquer. That is exactly what we intend. Why should I believe you? Your own history shows what humanity does with power. The wars, the empires, the atrocities. John nodded. Slowly, you're right. Our history is bloody. We have done terrible things. But we have also learned from those things. Every empire we built eventually fell, and every time it fell, we asked ourselves why. We studied our mistakes. We tried to do better. He leaned forward. Counselor, humanity's greatest strength is not our military power or our technology. It is our ability to change, to look at ourselves honestly, and admit when we were wrong, to build something new from the ashes of what failed. The Council has never admitted being wrong, Corvette said quietly. In 40,000 years, we have never apologized, never retreated, never shared power. Then perhaps it is time to try something new. Corvus stood and walked to the window. The lights of Nexus Prime stretched out below him, billions of beings going about their lives, unaware that the future of civilization was being decided in a small room above them. If I agree to what you propose, he said without turning around, many of my colleagues will see it as betrayal. The elder species have ruled for so long that they cannot imagine any other way. Some will fight to preserve the old order no matter the cost. Sara joined him at the window, and others will see it as the beginning of something better. Change is always difficult, but it is also necessary. Corvette turned to face her. His eyes held something that might have been fear or might have been hope. Tell me honestly, he said, do you believe this can work? A galaxy where all species stand as equals, where decisions are made together rather than imposed from above. Sara met his gaze without flinching. I believe it is the only thing worth trying, she said. The old order is breaking whether you accept it or not. The question is whether you break with it or whether you let it break you. Korth was silent for a long time. The lights of the station glowed around them. Somewhere out there, fleets waited in the darkness. Billions of people held their breath. Finally, Korth nodded. Very well, he said. Let us try something new. The days that followed were the most difficult of John Morrison's long career. Korth had agreed to consider reform, but agreeing in private and acting in public were very different things. The Council remained divided. The elder species fought bitterly over every detail. Sara coordinated the growing coalition from the Defiant Hope's cramped conference rooms. What had started as 40 species had grown to over 100. Representatives came and went at all hours. Messages arrived constantly from across the galaxy. The scope of the operation overwhelmed the small human diplomatic staff. John spent his time in meetings, endless meetings. He met with council members who wanted to negotiate. He met with military leaders who threatened war. He met with economic ministers who dangled trade deals and ambassadors who whispered warnings. Every conversation was a test. Every word mattered. On the fifth day, the Krayish Dominion formally announced their opposition to any reform. Their fleets began moving towards staging positions near human space. The news sent waves of fear through the coalition. "They're bluffing," Sara said, studying the fleet movements on her tactical display. "The Krish have everything to lose if the Council's authority collapses. They've maintained their slave castes for 10,000 years under Council protection. Reform threatens their entire social order. Bluffing or not, their ships are real," John replied. "If they attack while the Council is still divided, the coalition might fracture. Then we need to show them that the coalition won't fracture." Sara contacted Admiral Okonkwo within hours. Contingency ships that had been hiding in dark space began revealing themselves along the Krish border, not attacking, not threatening, simply appearing where they had been invisible before. The message was clear. Humanity saw everything. Humanity was everywhere, and humanity was not alone anymore. The Krayish fleet stopped their advance. Their ambassador requested an urgent meeting. John met her in a neutral conference room. Admiral Zeth of the Krayish Dominion was a massive being, covered in armored plates. Her species had evolved as apex predators, and their civilization reflected that heritage. They respected only strength. "You have made a mistake, human," she said. Her voice rumbled like distant thunder. "The Krish do not fear your hidden fleet. We have crushed species far more powerful than yours." "I don't doubt it," John said calmly. "Your military history is impressive. The campaigns against the Velic Confederation, the conquest of the Ardenti worlds, the subjugation of the Marathi before the Council recruited them as enforcers." Admiral Zth's eyes narrowed. Humans were not supposed to know about the Mara conquest. That history had been classified for millennia. "The question," John continued, "is whether you want to add another entry to that list. Another war, another conquered species, another 1,000 years of occupation and resistance. You think you could resist us?" John shook his head. "I think resistance is not the point. The Ardenti resisted for 3 centuries. The Velk held out for nearly 500 years. You won eventually, but what did you win? Broken worlds, bitter subjects, endless rebellions that drain your resources and poison your culture." He leaned forward. "Admiral, the Krish Dominion is dying. Not from external threats, but from internal rot. Your slave castes outnumber your warrior caste 10 to 1. Your economy depends on forced labor that grows less efficient every century. Your young people dream of escape rather than conquest. You are not expanding anymore. You are barely holding together." Admiral Zth's plates shifted in what might have been surprise or anger. "How do you know this?" "We watch, we listen, we learn." Jay's voice softened. "We also remember. Humanity built empires too. We conquered and enslaved and told ourselves it was our right, and every time the empire collapsed, the slaves revolted. The conquered peoples rose up. We learned that conquest creates enemies, not subjects. What would you have us do? Free our castes? Watch our civilization collapse? I would have you consider an alternative. The coalition we are building offers something the Council never has: economic partnerships that benefit both sides, technology sharing that lifts all species together, a path to transition that does not require sudden revolution." John stood and walked to the window. The stars beyond were cold and distant, your warrior caste. Fears losing their power, I understand. That, but consider what they might gain. Instead, a galaxy where the Krish are respected as partners rather than feared. As conquerors, a future where your children inherit something other than endless war. Admiral ZTH was silent for a long moment. Her massive form remained still. But John could sense the calculations running through her mind, the cold logic of a military strategist weighing costs and benefits. You ask us to trust you, she said finally. Why should we? Humanity is young and untested. Your promises mean nothing. Our actions mean something. We saved the Pori when it cost us dearly. We walked into radiation zones on the 4 when we had nothing to gain. We have spent 200 years proving ourselves through deeds, not words. And your hidden fleet, your 9,000 ships, those are also deeds. John nodded. Yes, they are. We built that fleet because we knew this day would come, because we knew that eventually someone would try to destroy us simply for being different. But we have never used that fleet for conquest. We have never attacked anyone who did not attack us first. He turned to face her directly. Admiral, humanity is offering the Krish something unprecedented, a genuine alliance with a species that has the power to challenge you but chooses partnership instead. You can refuse, you can return to your fleet and prepare for war, but I think you know how that war would end. Admiral ZTH rose from her seat. Her armored form towered over John, but he did not flinch. I will bring your proposal to my government, she said. I make no promises, but I will ensure that they hear your words accurately. She paused. At the door, you are a strange species. Human, you have power, yet you do not use it. You have enemies, yet you offer them friendship. I do not understand. You, John smiled slightly. Neither do we. Most of the time, but we keep trying to be better than we were. That's all any species can do. After Admiral ZTH departed, Sara arrived with a data tablet. Her face showed cautious optimism. The Marathi reformists have made their move, she said. They've called for a vote of no confidence in their current leadership. If they win, the Mara Collective will join the coalition. That's the 4th elder species to waver. How are the others responding? The Vithrani are still backing Corvette, but he's moving them toward compromise. The Ashantari have declared neutrality. The others are watching to see which way the wind blows. John sank into a chair. Exhaustion pulled at him. He had barely slept in a week. We're actually winning, he said quietly. I never thought I would see this. Sara sat beside him. We're not done yet. Council session reconvenes tomorrow. Everything depends on what Korth says. Do you trust him? Sara considered the question carefully. I trust that he loves his people and wants what's best for them. I trust that he's intelligent enough to see that the old order is ending, whether he supports it or not. I trust that he would rather be remembered as a reformer than as the last defender of a dying system. That's not the same as trusting him. No, it isn't, but it's enough to work with. John closed his eyes. Tomorrow would determine the future of human civilization. Tomorrow would shape the galaxy for millennia to come. He should be preparing. He should be reviewing strategy and practicing speeches. Instead, he sat in silence with his closest colleague and friend. They had done everything they could. The rest was beyond their control. Sara, he said finally, whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that I Couldn't have done this without you. You've been the best partner I could have asked for. Sara smiled. It was a rare expression on her usually serious face. Don't get sentimental on me, John. We have work to do, I know. Just thank you. She reached over and squeezed his hand briefly. Thank me when we've won. For now, get some sleep. Tomorrow we change the galaxy. John nodded and headed for his quarters. Sleep came slowly, but it came. In his dreams he saw stars. Millions of them, each one a world, each world a people, each people a story, waiting to be written. Tomorrow, humanity would help write a new chapter. The council chamber was silent when John and Sara entered. The galleries were even more crowded than before. Word had spread across the galaxy. Every species with a stake in the outcome had sent representatives. Some had traveled for days to arrive in time. This was the moment that would define the next era of galactic civilization. Counselor Korb stood at the speaker's platform. He looked different somehow. The arrogance that had marked his bearing a week ago was gone. In its place was something harder to define. Resignation perhaps, or acceptance. He waited until John and Sara had taken their positions on the floor. Then he raised his hand for attention. The chamber, already quiet, became absolutely still. Citizens of the galaxy, Korth began. His voice carried to every corner of the vast space. We gather today at a turning point in our shared history. The events of the past week have forced us to confront truths that we have long avoided. He paused, gathering himself. The Galactic Council has served as the guardian of civilization for 40,000 years. In that time, we have prevented countless wars. We have guided the development of thousands of species. We have maintained peace and stability across the stars. Several elder species representatives nodded in approval. This was familiar territory. The standard speech about council virtue. But Corvette's next words changed everything. We have also made mistakes, terrible mistakes. In the name of stability, we have suppressed species that pose no real threat. In the name of peace, we have imposed orders that served our interests rather than the common good. In the name of guidance, we have denied younger civilizations the right to choose their own paths. Gasps echoed through the galleries. Council members shifted uneasily in their seats. This was not the speech they had expected. Korv continued. The humans have shown us something we did not want to see. They have held up a mirror to our history and forced us to look at what we have become. A council that claims to serve the galaxy but truly serves only itself. A power structure built on fear rather than respect. He turned to face his fellow council members directly. I have spent 300 years defending this system. I have done things that I believe were necessary for the greater good, but I can no longer pretend that necessity excuses injustice. I can no longer claim that our methods were the only way. The Krish representative stood abruptly. This is treason. You speak against the very institution you swore to uphold. Corvette met his gaze calmly. I speak the truth, something that has been rare in this chamber for too long. He turned back to the assembly. Civilizational constraints protocol against humanity is hereby withdrawn. The council will not impose restrictions on a species that has done nothing wrong. We will not punish them for our own fears. The chamber erupted. Shouts of approval mixed with cries of outrage. Council guards moved to maintain order. John and Sara stood motionless, watching the chaos unfold around them. When the noise finally subsided, Corp raised his hand once more, but this is only the beginning. The humans have proposed something far more significant than their own freedom. They have proposed a reformation of galactic governance itself. He gestured, and a holographic display appeared, showing the details of the proposal that Sara had spent weeks developing: a summit of all species, elder and young together, equal voices, in crafting new laws for a new era. The council would remain as one voice among many, not as the sole authority. Decisions would be made by consensus rather than decree. The Vethrani trade minister stood. This is madness. The younger species are not ready for this responsibility. They will destroy themselves without our guidance. John stepped forward. It was time. With respect, he said, we have been destroying ourselves just fine without your help. Humanity fought 1,000 wars before we ever met an alien species. We built weapons that could end our entire civilization. We came to the edge of extinction more than once. He looked around the chamber. Thousands of eyes watched him, but we survived. We learned, we grew, not because someone forced us to, but because we chose to. Because the pain of our mistakes taught us lessons that no external authority could impose. Sara joined him. Every species in this chamber has a similar history. The Polari learned cooperation. Through famine, the Tessic developed democracy after centuries of tyranny. Even the elder species rose from violence and chaos. Growth requires struggle. It requires the freedom to fail and the opportunity to try again. She faced the galleries rather than the council. The humans are not asking to replace the council's authority with our own. We are asking for something simpler. We are asking for every species to have a voice, to participate in building a future that belongs to everyone, not just the powerful. Admiral Okonkwo's image appeared on the central display. She had been monitoring the session from her flagship, and to ensure that this transition happens peacefully, she said the contingency fleet will be repositioned not as a threat to the council but as protection for any species that faces aggression during the reformation process. John nodded. We built these ships to protect ourselves. We would rather use them to protect others. Any species that joins the new alliance will have humanity's guarantee of defense, not rule, not oversight. Simply protection from those who would use force to prevent change. The chamber was quiet now. The representatives were processing what they had heard. Complete restructuring of galactic civilization, an end to 40,000 years of council dominance, the beginning of something entirely new. Corvette spoke. Again, the council will vote on this proposal. Each member species will decide for themselves whether to support the reformation or oppose it, but I want to be clear about my own position. He stepped down from the speaker's platform and walked to where John and Sara stood. Then he did something that no council member had done in recorded history. He bowed to them. On behalf of the Vethrani people, I apologize for the harm we have caused, and I pledge our support for a new order built on respect rather than fear. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Then slowly other council members began to move. The Ascentury representative descended from her platform and bowed. The Morathi reformist leader, newly elected after the vote of no confidence, joined them. one by one, representatives of species that had suffered under council rule for millennia came forward, not all of them. The Krish delegation stormed out. Several other elder species followed. The vote would be contentious and the Reformation would face fierce opposition, but the tide had turned. The vote passed, narrowly, contentiously, with bitter arguments that lasted for hours, but it passed. 1 year later, the first Galactic Assembly convened on a world that had been chosen specifically because no species had ever claimed it. Representatives from 300 civilizations gathered to craft new laws for a new era. John Morrison stood at the back of the chamber watching the proceedings. He was technically retired. Now, younger diplomats had taken over the endless work of negotiation and compromise, but he had been invited to observe, a courtesy to the man who had started it all by saying no. Sara found him there as the session broke for lunch. "You look thoughtful," she said. "I'm watching history being made. It's a lot to process." Sara nodded. They watched the delegates filing out. Together, Polar and Tessic walked side by side with Vethrani and Ashenturi. Species that had been enemies for millennia were learning to work together. "Do you think it will last?" John asked. "Honestly, I don't know. We've been building civilizations and tearing them down for thousands of years. Maybe this one fails too. Maybe the old powers find a way to reassert themselves. Maybe humanity itself becomes corrupted by our new roles." She paused. "But we got them to try. For the first time in 40,000 years, the galaxy is trying something new that's worth whatever comes next." John smiled. It was the same thing he had told himself during the darkest nights of the crisis. Some things were worth attempting even if they failed. "Admiral Okonkwo sends her regards," Sara said. "The border patrols are going well. 3 incidents last month where the fleet deterred aggression against smaller species. No shots fired. The threat alone was enough. Good, that's how it should work. Power that never needs to be used because everyone knows it's there." They walked together toward the observation deck. The world below them was beautiful, young and green, untouched by war or exploitation. Symbol of what the galaxy might become. "What will you do now?" Sara asked. John shrugged. "Rest, read, maybe write a book about all this." "What about you?" "The assembly needs strategic advisors. Someone has to make sure the new system actually works. I've never been good at resting." John laughed. It was the first time he had truly laughed in longer than he could remember. "The galaxy is lucky to have you, Sara Chan. It's lucky to have us, both of us, all of humanity, really." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out as the world turned toward night. Somewhere out there, the contingency fleet patrolled the darkness. Somewhere, young species were taking their first steps toward the stars. Somewhere, old hatreds were slowly giving way to new possibilities. On a distant world at the edge of known space, a child looked up at the night sky. Her parents stood beside her, pointing at the stars. "That one there." The parents said, "That's where the humans come from." "Are they the ones who stood against the council?" "Yes, 2 of them, a man and a woman. They refused to bow and the galaxy changed forever." The child considered this. "Were they very strong?" "They were, but not in the way you might think. They were strong because they believed in something more than themselves, because they chose to protect others instead of conquering them. Is that why everyone talks about them? The parents smiled and pulled the child close. That's exactly why. They had the power to rule the galaxy. They chose to set it free instead. The stars glittered above them, cold and distant, yet somehow warmer than before. The galaxy that had watched in fear now watched with something else, hope, and somewhere in a quiet room on a world that had once been the center of absolute power, an old diplomat read the news of another peaceful resolution, another crisis averted through negotiation rather than force, another small step toward the future he had fought for. John Morrison smiled and turned off his console. The galaxy would face new challenges, new threats would arise, new conflicts would test the fragile peace they had built. But for now it was enough. They had shown the galaxy what humanity could be. The rest was up to everyone else.